Hello, good morning, and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. These are the topics that we shall be discussing today, 7 in total. Let's look at topic number 1, but before we start, I would urge you to support us as well by pressing the like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. 31 killed as rain, landslides, they caused destruction in Northeast. Let's understand this newspaper article in great detail. First, although these terms are used interchangeably, but what's the simple difference between landslips and landslides? Landslides are used to describe an instant event. Landslips, on the other hand, they refer to slow, continuous movement over a long period of time. So although these terms are used interchangeably, but there is a fine difference between the two. Now what has happened? Cyclone Rimal, because of which there was heavy rain, and this heavy rainfall, what it did, it triggered landslides, causing widespread destruction. But was this heavy rainfall unexpected? No. Why? Because repeatedly, Indian Meteorological Department would in its bulletins, regular bulletins, will warn of heavy rainfall because of Cyclone Rimal. Now what has happened is that these 7 northeastern states, along with Sikkim, along with northern West Bengal, these areas are prone to landslides. And this is something that we witnessed during Cyclone Alia as well, way back in 2009, in the same month, May, which caused widespread landslide events and ultimately led to destruction of lives and property as well. But what we also need to focus on, we need to focus on multi-hazard disasters. And what are these multi-hazard disasters? Basically, one event leading to another event, then leading to another event, so on and so forth. For example, cyclone warnings, then leading to heavy rainfall. This heavy rainfall, what it will do, it will breach, or it might breach, the glacial lakes. What it might lead to, flash floods. Then what will happen? Landslides. But because of that, now something else will happen. What something else will happen? It will lead to other events. For example, because of heavy rainfall, there is a breach of the glacial lakes, then there is flash flood, then it triggers landslides. It will lead to other events. For example, power outages. It will lead to breakdown of transport and communication. What it will also lead to, disruption in health services. What will also happen is that it will lead to disruption in relief and rescue operations. That is why we have to be absolutely careful in having the strategies in place to deal with these multi-hazard disasters. If you look at in India, let's look at the mains-based question that I picked up for you. Although India has done well to prepare and safeguard against certain natural events such as cyclones, but landslides remain a weak point. Comment. If we look at Geological Survey of India, it says close to 13% of the land mass in India, and this 13% of the land mass in India covers 15 states and 4 union territories. This 13% of the land mass in India, this is what we call, it is prone to landslides. And it is this area which covers almost the entire, all the hilly areas of India, which includes 7 sisters of Northeast, including Sikkim as well. In fact, the government data tells us that between 2015 till 2022, this particular area, this hilly area of 7 sisters in Northeast plus Sikkim, it has recorded close to 378 landslide events, which has caused destruction to life and property. If you look at the rest of the country, Kerala, for example, we also witnessed some events in Kerala. It has recorded close to 2,239 events, landslide events during this period, followed by states such as West Bengal, then Tamil Nadu, then Karnataka, followed by Jammu and Kashmir. So long story short, what we have seen is that landslides triggered by heavy rain, although this heavy rain was not unexpected because there were regular warnings in the regular bulletins of Indian Meteorological Department, but what it has led to destruction. It has led to the destruction of lives as well as the property. Although we have done well when it comes to dealing with the cyclones or the warnings from the cyclones, what we are missing, what is the weak point in our defense against these disasters is the landslide. Geological Survey of India says 13% of the land mass in India, which covers all the hilly areas of India, the entire Northeast, Sikkim, these are landslide prone areas. But remember, landslides can be triggered by earthquakes as well. Landslides can be triggered by heavy rainfall as well. One interesting point is that in this entire area of Northeast Sikkim, in the last 1 or 2 decades, no major landslide event has been recorded because of the earthquakes. So it is more to do with the landslides triggered by heavy rainfall. And that is why we need to focus on multi-hazard disasters. But not just that. What we have in place is a national landslide management strategy, which was conceptualized in the year 2019. And what this strategy focuses on, it focuses on vulnerability mapping, which are these areas. Basically, vulnerability mapping means you are basically identifying most vulnerable areas in India where heavy rainfall might trigger the landslide events. It also focuses on early warning systems. Now listen to me carefully. Early warning systems. Earthquake, cyclones, So what are you saying? Landslides can be triggered by earthquakes as well. Landslides can be triggered by heavy rainfall because of the cyclonic conditions as well. But earthquake is something that you can't predict. And in fact, I told you that in the northeast area, in the last 1 or 2 decades, no major landslide event has been recorded because of the earthquake. So what we need to now focus on, cyclonic conditions leading to heavy rainfall. Now, can there be a warning issued if there is a cyclone? Yes, because Indian Meteorological Department, what it does, it regularly sends out warning signals that it is going to be a cyclonic condition. It will lead to heavy rainfall. Now, this early warning system, due to cyclone and heavy rainfall, at least 1 day in advance, we will get to know that there is going to be a heavy rainfall, heavy downpour in this particular area. And then what we will also do, we will look at the vulnerability mapping. We will focus on those areas which are most vulnerable, which will trigger landslides. And our scientists, what they do the analysis of the soil. They look at the composition of the soil, and this is also where they also focus on rainfall threshold. How much amount of rainfall can this particular soil withstand? If there is a rainfall above that, then the warning will be triggered, and ultimately you can convey to the people that you should move away, you should leave your homes, because there will be a landslide event, so we can safeguard the lives of the precious lives of the people of this country. Although, listen to me carefully, although heavy rainfall in a single day would not trigger a landslide event unless and until there is a cloudburst event as well. That's something that you would know. But rainfall, heavy rainfall for a week or 10 days, that is going to be a dangerous thing. And then looking at the vulnerability mapping, by taking help from the scientists, we can map the areas where there is a significant amount of rainfall which the soil will not withstand. It goes against the threshold of the soil, and then you can trigger the warning and you can ask people to evacuate. But at the same time, let's look at this in a different angle as well. We need to focus on gender as well. Do you know, according to United Nations, 14 times women and children are more likely to die in natural disasters as compared to men. If you look at the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004, 70% of those who died were women. How? Although there are some issues, for example, women, they take care of their infants, kids, elderly, pregnant ladies inside the home, and ultimately, because the soil is unable to withstand the heavy rainfall, the house will collapse, because these are also kacha houses, and ultimately women die. And at the same time, one interesting thing, communication. Various organizations have conducted researches and surveys and studies and pointed out that mobile phone is basically with the men of this family, of this household. And if there is a warning signal, if there is a warning SMS which is sent by Indian Meteorological Department, or it is sent by departments in other countries, this message goes to the mobile phone of a person who is a man. And ultimately, when women, they do not possess mobile phones, they are unaware of this early warning signal sent by the government authorities, and ultimately they are more likely to die in these natural disasters. So in India, although we have sufficiently safeguarded ourselves from cyclones, from natural events such as cyclones, but landslides remain a weak spot. This is where we need to focus on multi-hazard disasters. We need to focus on early warning system. We need to focus on vulnerability mapping. Although we do this, but implementation is the key. That is why we should also focus heavily on the zoning regulations. Yes, development is important, but development for whom and at what cost? Yes, there are these difficult terrain, difficult hilly areas. They need to be brought into the ambit of development, but whether it can lead to events which will make the soil so weak that it cannot withstand the heavy rains. That is why for different zones in India, although we have zoning regulations, but we need to implement it strictly so that we do not whittle the land in such a manner that it is unable to withstand the heavy rainfall. That's what you need to understand from this article. Let's look at another important article, the question of Palestine's UN membership. We have discussed this before. Chethan sir has also discussed this, but let me briefly summarize it for you. Israel-Palestine issue or conflict is in the news since the time you were born, or even before that, or even when your parents were born. Very briefly, this Palestine, it was part of the Ottoman Empire. And then, because of the First World War, the Ottoman Empire collapsed and all those territories became independent nations. But be that as it may, the year was 1917, Balfour Declaration. What the British government, UK government did, it announced that we are taking steps, or we want to take steps to ensure that Palestine becomes the natural or national home of Jews. And Palestine, there is one religious place, Jerusalem, or religious city, Jerusalem, which is considered to be sacred for all the three Abrahamic religions, whether it is Judaism, whether it is Christianity, whether it is Islam. This place is considered to be sacred. It is argued that Jews were inhabiting this area, but they were expelled by the Christians. If you look at the three prophets of three Islamic religions, whether it is Prophet Moses of Judaism, Musa, or it is Jesus Christ or Isa of Christianity, or Prophet Muhammad of Islam, all the three religions, they hold significance or religious significance for this particular area. It is argued that Jews were inhabiting this land, then they were expelled by the Christians, and then when the Muslims came, some of the Jews were allowed to settle in Palestine area. But long story short, because of this 1917 Balfour Declaration, where British government made it clear that we want Palestine to become the natural home or the national home for all the Jews, and then in 1922, the League of Nations, which is the predecessor of the United Nations, they gave the administration of Palestine to United Kingdom. And then once Palestine came under the administration of United Kingdom, there was massive migration of Jews from different parts of the world to Palestine. Then we saw how the Jews were killed, assaulted in the Nazi Germany. Remember the stories of the Holocaust. And because of that also, there was massive migration of Jews to Palestine. And this is how the map looked like. This was in 1947, when United Nations then decided that we should have a two-state solution to this problem. And the problem is that we will create a separate territory, separate country, separate state for Jews, which is known as Israel, and separate country for Palestinian Arabs as well. So basically the purpose was, let's divide Palestine into one state for the Arabs, one state for the Jews, known as Israel, known as Palestine. But this was not acceptable to Palestine because they claimed that this entire territory belongs to them. They have been wrongfully deprived of their land. And this green area is something that is Palestine. And these small white dots, these were the Jewish or Israeli settlements. And then lots and lots of events. There was Israel-Gulf War. There were multiple wars later on, because of which Israel expanded its territory and occupied even those areas which were given to Palestine by the United Nations theory. And United States played a very important role for Israel, recognizing Israel as a sovereign country, and ultimately became the member of the United Nations as well. And this is the situation today, where bulk of this area is occupied by Israel or is taken control by the Israel, and these small green dots is now the Palestinian land, which is now also under the occupation of Israel. And then something happened last October last year, when Hamas breached the Gaza-Israeli border, attacked the Israeli citizens, took children, women, elderly as hostage, and then a full-blown war between Hamas and Israel started, which has also led to the claims of genocide, where it is argued by South Africa and other countries that what Israel is doing currently, it is committing genocide against the Palestinian people. And we saw the horrific attacks on Rafah as well, on hospitals, on settlements as well. But that's something that you're all aware of. In 2011, United Nations came up with a proposal, or United Nations was given a proposal by Palestine that we want to become a full member of United Nations. We want to become a full-fledged member of the United Nations. How does a country become the member of United Nations? For that, this applicant, it will have to write to the Secretary General of United Nations. And then the Secretary General of United Nations will submit this proposal to the United Nations General Assembly. But before that, there has to be an approval, or what we call a recommendation, by the United Nations Security Council. And you would know that there are 5 countries, known as P5 countries, who are the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council: United States, Russia, England, France, and China. These are the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, and they enjoy veto. Since United States and Israel, they are allies, they are close friends, United States blocked and vetoed this proposal. And unless and until this recommendation is given by the United Nations Security Council, no member can be admitted as a full member of the United Nations. United States argues that yes, we can give permanent membership or full membership to Palestine, but that should be preceded by two-state theory. That means first we should recognize Israel as well as Palestine as 2 different countries, 2 separate states, because Israel has still not accepted this 2-state solution. Palestine also says, Arab countries also say that we want full-fledged Palestine, not this truncated Palestine that United Nations offered us. So there has to be only one solution to this problem, and that is 2-state theory, 2-state solution. Israel and Palestine both should exist side by side. No country should wage a war against the other country. Each country should respect the sovereignty of each other. That's how we can live in the world of peace. But Israel is not accepting. Palestine has its own objections as well. So this 2-state solution has not been given final shape. So United States argues first 2-state solution should be accepted, implemented, and then the logical conclusion would be that Palestine would become the full member of the United Nations. So then in 2012, Palestine was given a non-member observer status. But now we see the world is also changing. Although initially the world, some countries in Europe, the West, they recognize the right of Israel to defend itself against the terrorists. But now United States is also trying to put pressure on Israel that you should not resort to war crimes, you should not resort to genocide, there has to be ceasefire, there has to be a dialogue between Hamas and Israel, the hostages taken by Hamas should be released, and the war must come to an end because innocents are losing their lives. But Israel is hell-bent, is adamant on not going for a ceasefire because it wants the complete annihilation of Hamas. But in the process of annihilating Hamas, it is also committing war crimes. It is also leading to the destruction of hospitals, the health sector in Palestine, the destruction of lives and property of the innocents as well. But now the world opinion seems to be changing, and in United Nations General Assembly, what happened is that overwhelming majority, more than 2/3 of the members, they did try to say that Palestine should become the full member of the United Nations. But without the recommendation of the United Nations Security Council, this cannot happen because United States is vetoing it. Once recommendation comes from United Nations Security Council, then the proposal is sent to United Nations General Assembly, and then General Assembly by 2/3 majority, if it votes, then Palestine can become a full-fledged member of United Nations. But then United Nations General Assembly also has to see that this particular applicant is peace-loving, that this particular applicant can willfully and wholly accept the Charter of the United Nations, which is not to resort to violence, not to resort to some acts which are detrimental to the peace and sovereignty of other nations. Then what is the way forward? According to this writer, something which happened for Mongolia can be the precedent for Palestine, which means Mongolia also faced objections from United Nations Security Council, but then United Nations General Assembly sent another recommendation to the Security Council, trying to persuade it that you should not object to Mongolia becoming the full member of the United Nations. Something of this sort can happen or should happen, according to this writer, in the Palestine case as well. So although overwhelming majority voted, and this time India also voted in favor of Palestine being admitted as the full member of the United Nations. In fact, India has never objected to any country's membership of the United Nations. We even voted in favor of Pakistan becoming the member of the United Nations, or People's Republic of China becoming the member of the United Nations. So we have never objected, and this goes in line, according to this writer, the philosophy of Pandit Nehru as well, who said that we should not block anybody's entry into the United Nations. But then what is the other side of the argument here? Other countries are also fearful. When I say other countries, that means those countries who have veto power. For example, China would also be fearing that if without United Nations Security Council approval, recommendation, a country is admitted to the United Nations, because in 1940s, can without the recommendation of the United Nations Security Council, can a country be still admitted to the United Nations if the overwhelming majority of the United Nations General Assembly agrees to it? This matter was taken to the World Court, the International Court of Justice. And International Court of Justice said no. The prerequisite is the recommendation of the United Nations Security Council. Once that recommendation comes, then the United Nations General Assembly by 2/3 majority has to vote in favor of admitting that country into the United Nations. But the other side is, can without the recommendation of the Security Council, can a country, can an applicant be admitted to the United Nations? Although United States has vetoed this, Russia and China, they are also not so much in favor of tinkering with the powers of the Security Council. Why? Because China would fear that if without the Security Council recommendation, if the veto powers of the Security Council permanent members is done away with, then what stops the United Nations tomorrow from admitting Taiwan as the member of the United Nations? Russia has its own concerns as well. Russia has been supporting the Serbia when it comes to Kosovo. So what if Kosovo, which is today not a full-fledged member of the United Nations, what if tomorrow, without the United Nations Security Council recommendation, where Russia would play a veto role, Kosovo becomes admitted to the United Nations as a full-fledged member? So this power play which is playing, it has enormous diplomatic ramifications. And what this writer is now saying, admit Palestine as a member, even if it's a non-member, non-full-fledged member, but with an observer status. But now Palestine should be made member of other United Nations organs. Maybe other organs of the United Nations, other bodies, organizations of the United Nations. Because today, if you're not a full-fledged member, you cannot introduce any proposal. You don't have the voting rights as well. But if Palestine is admitted to the other organs, major principal organs of the United Nations, what it might lead to? It might lead to Israel exiting from United Nations. This writer says that is okay. Or we should suspend Israel from participating in any discussions or groups of United Nations General Assembly. And would that be unprecedented? No, because that's something that United Nations General Assembly has done in the past. For example, South Africa, when there were widespread or wide-scale apartheid regimes in South Africa, where there was discrimination on the grounds of race in South Africa. South Africa was suspended from participating in any discussions of the United Nations General Assembly. So bypass United Nations Security Council. Let Palestine become the member of important organs, principal organs of the United Nations. Let them participate in the debates, and let's exclude Israel from all the discussions of the United Nations General Assembly, because that would be significant force and pressure on Israel. And then it will give up on its rigidity, maybe stop war in Palestine, or other countries such as United States will not veto the inclusion of Palestine as the full member of the United Nations. That's what you need to understand from this article. Let's look at another article. This is the editorial, Turnout conundrum. A difficult question. What is the difficult question? 18th Lok Sabha is being conducted, or 18th Lok Sabha elections is being conducted in 7 phases. 6 phases are already over. 1 phase is left. One takeaway from these elections is the low voter turnout. What is the editorial saying? That in 2009, that was the first election conducted after delimitation. Now we'll say, sir, delimitation was not conducted since 1976. It was conducted in 2002. The final award was given in 2008. But that delimitation exercise did not lead to increase in the number of seats. Clear? But internal delimitation was carried out. Some seats got increased. Reservation for SCs and STs in Lok Sabha got increased. But overall number of seats did not change, but delimitation was carried out in 2002. The final award came in 2008, and the first election after that delimitation was carried out in 2009. And in 2009, we saw a massive increase in the eligible voters. Those voters who have crossed, or those Indians who have crossed the age of 18 and are now eligible to cast their vote. 2009, and then we saw significant increase in 2014. Then we saw a significant increase in 2019. Another small incremental increase in 2019. But in 2024 elections, we have seen low voter turnout. Critics are saying it is not low voter turnout because the absolute number of voters have increased, or the participation of voters has increased. Sir, what are you trying to say? You're confusing us. Let me make it simple. What is the voter percentage? If 1 lakh people have polled, have cast their vote, out of 8 lakh people, then we calculate the percentage. And by that logic, the percentage would be calculated. Clear? 12.5% would be the voter turnout, for example. But what if, let's say 12.5% is the voter turnout. What if tomorrow there is an increase in the number of eligible voters? That means the number of eligible voters now is 10 lakhs. And out of 10 lakhs, we say 2 lakh people have registered their vote or cast their vote, which basically our 1.9 lakh voters have cast their vote. Which means the absolute voter turnout would be less as compared to previous election. But the absolute number of voters have increased. That is why some critics say you should not be focusing on low voter turnout, because low voter turnout is based on the percentage. What is the percentage of the total eligible voters who cast their vote? But this time we have seen an increase in the number of eligible voters, those who have crossed the age of 18. So in absolute numbers, the number of people voting is much higher as compared to 2019 elections. But the Hindu editorial says, even if we look at that argument, in 132 out of 485 constituencies which have voted in the first 6 phases, we have seen a reduction in the absolute number of voters. That means even the absolute number of voters have reduced. And then, what is the reason for this low voter turnout? There can be multiple reasons. According to this editorial, one reason is no strong fights. Not the verbal fight or hand-to-hand combat between the candidates or the political parties. No strong fights, for example, the state of Gujarat, where there is one principal party, the BJP, and the principal opposition party, Congress, is very weak, where their candidates are disappearing, where their cadres are disappearing, where their leaders are jumping the ship, where their MLAs are resigning and joining the BJP. So in absence of a strong fight, where the people of Gujarat, they have made it, they are sure that BJP is going to win all these 26 seats or 25 seats. So why should we bother voting? Because there is no strong fight. That is one reason, because there is low voter turnout. There can be another reason, for example, in Kerala, where there are 2 important principal political parties, the Congress and the CPIM. Both of them are allies at the center. They are part of the India Alliance or India Alliance. So because of that reason, why we have seen there is close to 6.5% reduced voter turnout in Kerala. There is 4.5% reduced voter turnout in Gujarat. Maybe because there is no strong fight. Maybe it is because of weather. Extreme weather conditions. For the first time since 1951 elections, we have seen that election cycle has extended to June as well. Otherwise, in May, we would see the results. Maybe because of the extreme heat conditions, people are averse from going out and moving out and casting their vote. That can be another reason. Or is it because of interstate migration? Look at the northern states. Look at the states in the central India. Look at Bihar, for example. Women voters have outnumbered men voters. What could be the possible reason? Men have migrated to other states for their livelihood opportunities, and women are taking care of their homes. This is not a sexist statement, but this is the reality in these areas. Which means women have come out in large numbers, outnumbering the men, because men are somewhere else in some other parts of the country because there is interstate migration. And who will explain all this? According to the editorial, Election Commission of India should explain. But be that as it may, what is the solution? And instead of just focusing on conflicts or controversies, we also need to present a solution according to the requirements of the civil services examination. And the solution can be twofold. One, compulsory voting. Make voting compulsory. If we exclude those who are aged, infirm, pregnant or lactating mothers, they can stay at home. It's not necessary for them to vote, but apart from them, everybody who is eligible to cast the vote should cast the vote, otherwise there should be penalty. Compulsory voting is not a new phenomenon. It's practiced in Australia, Belgium, Peru, Brazil. These are the countries, in close to 14 countries of the world, compulsory voting is in practice. So something that we should implement in India. Otherwise, there is declining legitimacy of governments today. We are saying that this government which gets elected is illegitimate. Why? Because it is not supported by the majority of the people. Opposition says that BJP government is not the real government. Why? Because they only got 37% of the votes. They only got 32% votes in 2014. So majority of the people of this country reject them. So they call this government a legitimate government. The only way in which we can counter this allegation is if the number of voters turning out and casting their vote increases, which means the overall participation of the people will also increase, which basically means that the legitimacy of the government will increase. Because now this government will be voted into power by 50% or more of the voters. Because more voter turnout, more votes for that party because it gets elected. This editorial says, if people get the government they deserve when they go out to vote. And the government they don't deserve when they don't go out to vote. You get the government you deserve if you go out and vote. You will get the government you don't deserve if you don't go out and vote, because there is something called voters' apathy. And this voters' apathy can be resolved through compulsory voting. But compulsory voting as an independent idea will not work. How can you force these migrants to vote? Because they will lose out on their livelihood opportunities if they have to cancel their work and take buses and trains or aircrafts to go to their constituencies and vote. And this is where the idea that Election Commission of India came up with, remote electronic voting machine, where even if you are in Bengaluru, but you are a registered voter in Bihar, a village in Bihar, you should be eligible, you should be allowed to vote in Bengaluru for the constituency in Bihar. So there should be remote electronic voting machine. This concept should be implemented. And more, even to get those who are aged, infirm, pregnant and lactating mothers, something that we have right now for elderly, vote from home. That provision should be extended to them as well. So that through this compulsory voting, we can deepen democracy in India. That's what the idea, the objective of the Election Commission of India has to be. Clear? And that is why this question for your mains practice, compulsory voting is the only way to counter voting apathy and declining legitimacy in democracies. Critically analyze. Which means you will have to give arguments in favor of compulsory voting. You also have to give arguments against compulsory voting as well. For example, somebody like India's foremost political scientist, Pratap Banu Mehta, he says voting should remain an act of choice. It cannot be forced. He writes, voting is an important duty, is a laudable value. But a flourishing, thriving democracy requires a variety of dispositions, including an option of disengagement. I want to disengage from the system. I don't care who is the chief minister, who is the prime minister, who is the MP, who is the MLA. I just want to disengage from the system. That is democracy. A variety of dispositions. Pratap Banu Mehta writes that voting is a laudable value, is an important duty. But a vibrant, flourishing democracy requires a variety of dispositions, including an option of disengagement. Voting must remain an act of choice, not driven by coercion or allurement. Neither should you be coerced and forced into voting, nor you should be allured. For example, giving biryanis, drugs, liquor, cash to vote for a particular candidate. Voting must remain an act of choice. Write an answer to this question. Drop in your comments in the comment section. Let others evaluate your answer. So all the students are encouraged to write answers to these questions. Maybe once the prelims is over. If you're not writing the prelims, then write an answer so that other students, aspirants, they can evaluate your answer. So you evaluate your each other's answers, and that will give you more insights. Please do that. Let's look at another article. Still no sign of the language of equity and inclusion. According to 2011 census, in India, we have close to 5 million individuals who are unable to hear properly, or what we can call deaf and hearing disabled. Those who are hard of hearing, DHH, deaf and hard of hearing citizens. But that's the old census, 2011 census, numbers, figures. If you look at National Association of Deaf, which is the national association for all the people who are deaf and hard of hearing, they say this number is not 5 million, it is 18 million. More number of people affected. If you look at World Health Organization, it estimates that there are nearly 63 million people in India who find difficulty in hearing, who have some sort of impairment when it comes to hearing capabilities and abilities. That's the situation that we are in now. India has ratified, the year was 2007, United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We also have a law. The law Rights of the Protection of People with Disabilities Act 2016. So we have laws, we have ratified the convention. There are so many people who are hard of hearing or deaf in India. Despite that, what these three writers are saying is that when Election Commission of India announced in a much publicized press conference the dates of the 18th Lok Sabha election, there was one thing missing, which most of the people did not notice, but they noticed, and these people noticed, is that there was no one with the sign language interpreting what the Chief Election Commissioner and election commissioners are saying with respect to elections. So you're basically excluding these millions of people from one of the most important democratic exercises of the world. Sign language interpreter was not there, which you might have noticed in the bulletins of Doordarshan, where although you are the news reader is reading the news as well, but on the top right column there is also a sign interpreter who, with the use of hands, is making you understand what this person is saying because you are unable to hear it. You are deaf or hard of hearing. That's something which was missing. These three writers say, although in India we have national program for prevention and control of deafness, but what does it focus on? It focuses on get the people so that we can diagnose whether they are suffering from deafness or they are hard of hearing. We can recommend them good hearing devices. That's where the focus is. The focus is not on recognizing Indian Sign Language. And the demand of these three writers is to give official status to this Indian Sign Language. Because today, even in our schools, we don't focus on Indian Sign Language, we focus on oralism. For example, in most of the schools, even those schools which are for deaf and dumb, even in those schools, majority of these schools, we focus on oralism. For example, I am suffering from deafness. You have to make me understand. So what you will focus on? Oralism. That means your lip movements. Polity. P-O-L-I-T-Y. Polity. So through your oral signs, oralism as what we call it, you're making me understand. But why don't we focus on Indian Sign Languages? So that instead of oralism, you can, through the movement of your hands, Dictate to me, communicate to me, what exactly are you saying? Although, in 2015, the Ministry of Social Justice in India, it set up Indian Sign Language Research and Training Center. But even then, on the ground, we don't see it working effectively. And this is what leads to marginalization and exclusion of millions of people in this country who are suffering from this disability. And you're discarding them even when this, one of the most important democratic exercise is being conducted. And when the dates are announced, there is no Indian Sign Language interpreter. So what their demand is, focus on Indian Sign Language, give it an official status, and move away from oralism and teach this Indian Sign Language to the people. And at the same time, those who are, very important point, those who are suffering from deaf and hard of hearing disability, they should be employed because they have now understood this Indian Sign Language. They should be employed to teach this to others so that they gain gainful employment. That's the crux of this article. A very important article, highly relevant for the mains examination. Let's look at some of the prelims-based questions or prelims-based facts. A pair of lowest monkeys at Indira Gandhi Zoological Park in Visakhapatnam. These are monkeys, also known as mountain monkeys, who are found mostly in the dense forested areas, the mountains. And they're characterized by this white beard. Where are they found? They're not found in India. They were rescued from the animal traffickers from Srikakulam. Where are they found? They are found in Democratic Republic of Congo. They are found in Burundi. They are found in Uganda. And if you look at their IUCN status, because that is what you need to focus on when it comes to the civil services examination, because of their declining population, they are categorized as vulnerable. And why are they categorized as vulnerable? Because there is a threat to their habitat. Because where do they live? In the forests. And there is a destruction of their habitat going on because of agriculture extension. Felling of trees in the forests so that you can sow crops. You are extending the agriculture. That leads to loss of habitat, and that leads to the declining population of these lowest monkeys. That's ultimately a threat to them. Another threat is because they are also killed for meat. These are two gravest threats to the lowest monkeys, but their IUCN status is vulnerable, not found in India, but found in areas such as Congo, Uganda, Burundi, so on and so forth. Plus, I don't think you need that additional information, but the additional information can be that they move together in small groups led by, and this group is female dominated. But that's not important for your exam. Let's skip that and let's focus on something else. How Manthan's depiction of class, caste and gender hierarchies remain relevant. Manthan, directed by Shyam in 1976, bagged the Filmfare Award or the National Film Award in 1976. It was India's official entry to the Oscars as well, starring the terrific Smita Patil. Other stars include Nasiruddin Shah, Girish Karnad, Mohan Agashe, some fantastic. If you are a lover of Indian cinema, and if you understand and follow Indian cinema, the real Indian cinema, you would have heard about this movie, you would have heard about these stars. But if you're following the most eligible, the movies of the most eligible bachelor of the film industry, then I can't help you. And don't lynch me for this, otherwise I would need a bodyguard. And I will become the most wanted person on this planet, at least in India. These are just hints, but we'll skip that. Manthan, let's go back to Manthan. It has now been restored by the Film Heritage Foundation with 4K technology. Maybe if we have time later on, for your mains exam, you will have to discuss 4K technology as well. Maybe a question can be asked. It was restored and now it was screened at the Cannes, one of the biggest film festivals of the world. But what you need to understand here is that this film, Manthan, was perhaps the first crowd-funded film of India. It's basically based on the efforts taken by Verghese Kurian in Operation Flood. It's basically on the success story of Amul, how the farmers, milk farmers came together, set up this cooperative. But it was not just based on that, it was also based on the caste, it was also based on the bureaucratic struggles. You can watch this movie, this freely available on YouTube. The color edition of this movie is available on YouTube. But it was the first crowd-funded film of India. In a sense, 50,000 farmers, they donated 2 rupees each to finance this movie, and this movie was made. These are some important facts. No matter when, how, where it can be relevant, but this information, keep it in your mind. You can utilize it anywhere. Let's look at the last prelims-based fact, microcephaly. What is it? Basically, the head of the infant is smaller, which basically means the brain is also smaller. It's basically a rare neurological disorder. Which basically will affect the speech of the infant, which will affect the motor capabilities, walking, standing, and it also leads to impaired intellectual capabilities. So you can see, unfortunately, these kids, once they are born, they are intellectually disabled. Microcephaly. And there is a research going on. You don't have to focus on that research, but one thing that you must keep in mind is that most cases of microcephaly come from consanguineous marriages, where marriages take place amongst the close relatives, first cousins, for example, which is practiced by some communities, some castes, some tribal groups in India as well. That is why the gynae would ask the couple, are you in any way related to each other or not, to check the medical history, because then if you are married in the close circles, there are likely chances of microcephaly, according to this research, previously as well. So what is microcephaly? It's a rare neurological disorder, which basically is characterized by the small head size, which basically means the small brain size, which means the mind is not fully developed, and it leads to some disabilities, infirmities in terms of motor capabilities, in terms of intellectual development, so on and so forth. There is another neurological disorder which is characterized by large head. And what that is, let me know in the comment section. This is the end of today's The Hindu Newspaper Analysis. If you have understood these topics, let me know in the comment section. And do not forget to press the like button. I'll see you again very soon with another edition of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. Thank you for watching. All the best. Bye-bye. Have a great day.